So you decided to join the Army, you're trying to get physically prepared. How does the Army actually prepare you for running? What's going on, guys? So the other day I made a video talking about running and how to improve and why you're not improving on your run. But when you get to basic training, when you get to AIT, when you get in the real Army, like, how does the Army actually train you? There's certain things that you can do now, but like, what does the Army actually do? Now, one of the first things I'm gonna, I guess, lay it out for you, like the majority of the time whenever you do runs, if you guys didn't know, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday are generally run days. On Tuesday and Thursday are generally muscle failure days, which is basically like doing push-ups and pull-ups and stuff like that. When you're actually in the real Army, you might even get to go to the gym. And then on, like, you know, cardio days, you might honestly get to play like basketball or do something fun like that, right? So things might vary. But for the most part, when you're actually running, when you're trying to improve in your cardio, when the Army's trying to get you ready, it's going to be up to the platoon leader, whoever the platoon leader is, to prepare you and make the plan. But some of the common things you're going to see are 30-60s, 61-20s, ability group runs, release runs, and maybe even hill runs. So if you're really trying to prepare yourself for the Army, you're trying to get ready for basic training, what should you do? You should try to incorporate at least a little bit of all of those things. And also you can incorporate longer runs, because every now and then you might do like a battalion run or brigade run or maybe even a company run, where those are basically just slower paced, long runs in formation for like 4, 5, 6 miles or so, maybe even longer depending on what unit you're in. But those are going to be few and far between, but they do happen. Now, what are 30-60s? What are 61-20s? And whenever you actually do them, how many should you do? Because when I made this video, I mentioned 30-60s and 61-20s before, and people want to know like how many repetitions you should do of each and what is it actually. So 30-60s is sprinting for 30 seconds, walking for a minute. 61-20s is sprinting for a minute, walking for 2 minutes. Now, the key here, right? So whenever you're doing PT, whenever you get to basic training or AIT, 30-60s and 61-20s will either be a really good workout or a really crappy workout, and it all depends on you, and it all depends on how much you're willing to push yourself. So running, improving on your cardio is really a mental thing. It's like it takes a lot of mental strength to keep pushing yourself and keep pushing yourself, because you have to keep pushing yourself past the limits. And when you're doing the 30 seconds of sprints, or you're doing the 1 minute of sprints, you need to literally sprint like as hard as you possibly can. Like, you need to go as hard as you can, and the harder you go, the better you're going to improve and the more it's going to help you, because there's going to be people who think of the 30 and the 60-second sprint as more of just like a run, and then you walk, and then you run, and then you walk. But no, it's actually sprint as hard as you freaking can for 30 seconds or a minute, and then walk, because that is going to help you out. Running, just doing like 60 seconds of running just at a normal pace, let's say you're running at your 2 mile pace. So you're running at a pretty good speed, but then you just walk for 2 minutes. You're not really going to make much improvement. If anything, the best you're really gonna do is just maintain where you're at. So if you're really struggling on your PT, you need to sprint. Now, how many of these iterations should you do? In the Army, generally they do 8 to 10 iterations of each. So one iteration will be a 30-second sprint, and then a walk for 60 seconds. And that's one iteration. So each one is one iteration, and you should do 8 to 10 of those. If you're first starting out running, then I recommend doing 30-60s, and then once you get better at those, and maybe you're not as tired anymore after doing those 8 to 10 reps, then you can bump it up to the 61-20s, which will get you more tired. Even though you're resting for 2 minutes, if you are sprinting as hard as you can for 60 seconds, you're going to be tired, and you're definitely going to take up all of those 2 minutes to recover. So that is really going to help you, and that's kind of where the Army is kind of leaning towards. And there's like, oh, these 30-60s and 61-20s are really helping people, but it's because and if you're actually pushing yourself. If you're not pushing yourself, you're not going to improve at all. Now, the other way that the Army prepares people, and they do running and cardio for PT, is the ability group runs and release runs. Now, what these are is the ability group runs is pretty much what it says, ability group runs. So you're going to be separated in different ability groups based on your PT score and how fast you did it for the run. So you got A group, B group, C group, or Alpha group, Bravo group, Charlie group. And let's say Alpha group is like if you have a 13:30 or below for your run time. Bravo group is like if you have 13:30 to 15 for your 2-mile time. And then C group or Charlie group is basically anybody below that. So, you know, 15 minutes to failing on your PT test. That's gonna be in Charlie group. And basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna run at a different speed, harder or easier depending on which group you're in, and farther, right? So that is just going to be really all that is. You're gonna be running in formation. So how you can train for that is just by running longer distance, because the free runs or the release runs, that is running in a formation, and then once you, like, let's say you're running down a road, you run down the road for 2 miles, and then once you reach the end, it's a release run back. So what you're gonna do is you're just gonna run in formation, some kind of formation down, and then once you come back, they're just gonna release you and you can run at your own pace. So both of these things, if you're really trying to prepare for that, then all you really need to do is just make sure you're incorporating some longer distance runs, because generally these are gonna be a lot longer or a couple miles longer than the 2-mile run for your PT test. So make sure you're incorporating some 3-mile runs, some 4-mile runs, maybe even some 5-mile runs if you're at that level to where you can do that. Now, I mentioned one of the ways that the Army can train you on your running is like mountain runs and stuff like that, or running uphill. Whenever I was at AIT, it was one of the things that we did at least about every 2 weeks or so, maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks we would do this. There's this big hill over at Fort Gordon where I was, and it was like over a mile down, and it was like really steep downhill. So we would run downhill and then we would have to run back up the hill. I swear, running up that hill was just a pain in the butt. So you're gonna get some things thrown at you like that. There might be some different variations that you might encounter. So the best way to do that, like if you really want to prepare for that kind of thing, make sure you're not always running on like a flat track or on a treadmill. Just make sure you're actually out, you know, maybe running around a neighborhood, maybe run on the road to where it's not always just flat, because if you're on a track or if you're running on a treadmill, it's just always gonna be flat, it's always gonna be consistent, and then whenever you have to run up these hills or whatever, it's going to be more difficult for you, because when you're at basic training, the PT tests aren't always gonna be on the track. Like, they could be on a road. Whenever I was at basic at Benning, Charlie 247, for those of you curious, we did the 2-mile runs on the road, and the start line was actually like a railroad crossing, and it was like downhill from the start, which meant for about a quarter mile, we were running pretty much downhill. And then on the way back up, coming back, it was uphill for the last quarter mile, and that was just terrible. So it's not always gonna be super flat ground whenever you're running in the Army, so make sure you're actually doing that. Make sure you're not always running on a treadmill. It's totally fine to run on a treadmill, especially now, since it's wintertime. Sometimes it might just be like super cold, you know, and you don't wanna run in the morning whenever it's like 20 degrees or whatever. But, you know, running on a treadmill is great, but just make sure you're building your body up to where that you're okay with running on a hilly terrain. Make sure you're okay with running on the hard concrete ground, because if you're always running on a treadmill, maybe you're gonna be more prone to getting shin splints or foot issues, leg issues, because it's gonna be much more of a hard impact on the ground when you're on the ground versus a treadmill. So that is how the Army is going to train you for your running, for your cardio. Those are the different main exercises that you're going to do on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday whenever it's the run days. I hope you guys got something out of this. I hope maybe you incorporate some of this. If you're a beginner, I highly recommend doing 30-60s and then just incorporate some longer distance runs at a slower pace. So if you incorporate those two things and then test yourself on a regular basis, then I think you definitely will improve. And again, the key here is to really push yourself, like push yourself. It's a really mental thing. So running is really, really mental, because it takes a lot of time to improve. It takes you, you know, a lot of time when you're doing it to get past the mental barriers of like, oh crap, I'm like tired right now, you know, I'm doing a 2-mile run and I'm exhausted already after a mile. Like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna do this 2 miles? Like, you really need to build up some mental toughness, right? So that's a little tip for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button. That would be awesome. If you want to stick around for some more of my videos, hit the subscribe button. That would be even better. If you do have any comments, questions, or concerns, comment section is down below. You can also follow me on Instagram and Snapchat right here. Those things have been blowing up recently, but still, send me some messages. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys later.